It is Monday, February 6th. This is the Wiltfong Whiparound. I am Lance Glenn, joined alongside, as always, by the Director of Recruiting for 24/7 Sports, Steve Wiltfong. And Steve, we may be in a dead period, but the recruiting news certainly hasn't stopped. We got a couple commitments over the last few days. We're going to talk about them, as well as a little bit of an update on Williams Nwaneri, the top defensive lineman in the 2024 class. But let's start on the plains in Auburn. Walker White, a four-star quarterback, committed to Hugh Freeze and the Tigers this past weekend. So what can you tell us about what Auburn is getting in White and what type of quarterback he is for the Tigers in the future?
Well, what an exciting time to just follow Auburn football, Lance, when you're talking about the way that they finished that 2022 cycle, finishing or 2023 cycle, finishing with the nation's number 17 recruiting class, flipping guys from Ohio State, Florida State, Michigan State along the way. And then to really be off and running here in this cycle with one of the top quarterback recruits in the country in Walker White, who chooses Auburn over Clemson. We haven't seen Auburn win recruiting battles like this in several years. And Walker White took his last visit to Clemson and was the last recruit to leave Dabo Swinney's house during an elite junior day visit weekend where the Tigers, the Clemson Tigers, that is, hosted 24 of their top targets, all committable offers. It looked like the Tigers maybe had some momentum with Walker White, but everybody was chasing Auburn in the visit that he had earlier in the month. And when it was time to talk with his family, talk with his circle of trust about who he was going to make a college decision for, everything came back up Auburn. And it was because he said that their coaches are geniuses about offense and the quarterback position, from Hugh Freeze to Philip Montgomery to Jesse Stone. But there's just a different kind of environment, buzz around Auburn right now, where this is a program where if they were a hat on the table for a blue chip recruit making their college decision under the previous regime, they were typically an afterthought, where now anytime Auburn is in the mix for a recruit that is high on their board, they cannot be slept on moving forward. I've given a lot of credit to Zach Etheridge and Cadillac Williams and even Trevon Reed, for guys that helped bridge the gap from the old coaching staff to the new coaching staff. When Coach Harsin was let go, those were the guys that helped make sure Auburn was hosting top recruits for game day visits. And when Hugh Freeze and this staff got in there, they were able to hit the ground running, already having recruits interested. And Auburn is a place that's very exciting. Won national championships recently, won SEC titles recently. That this is a program that should be this relevant on the recruiting trail. And they go out and land Walker White, who was one of the most sought-after players at the position in the country, threw for nearly 2,000 yards as a junior with 25 touchdowns, rushed for 837 more yards and 16 more scores. He's 6'3", 218 pounds. When we met him at the All-America Bowl National Combine, not this past year, but the year before, he looked like he was already college-ready physically at that point. But in addition to his physical traits, this is a guy that appears to have elite leadership qualities. And as Auburn tries to change their culture around and get this thing going, it's going to take strong leaders as well. And one source kind of compared him to Jarrett Stidham and Nick Marshall in that regard, and pointed to on his biggest day when he committed to Auburn on the 24/7 Sports channel on Friday, Lance. One of the things he did was point out about 12 or 13 guys that he wanted to come play for him at Auburn. He's already got a plan to help Coach Freeze and company recruit. He's a guy that we certainly can see leading this football team in workouts and helping this team grow together and come together off the field. But to beat Clemson for a quarterback like this, his other finalist was Baylor, but had offers from like Alabama, Oklahoma, Arkansas. Ole Miss was a leader in this one for a long time. Just a big win at a pivotal position. Auburn has their guy, and it was an awesome recruiting win for Auburn, and a program that's been a lot of fun to follow really since November on the trail to now. And I haven't said that about Auburn for a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while with the Tigers being fun on the trail. And like you said, once Hugh Freeze took over, he had a strong finish to 2023, starting out well in 2024. Important, obviously, to get your quarterback early, as oftentimes quarterbacks, they're your best peer recruiters. And like you said, Walker White already name dropping some guys that he's going to want to try to bring with him to Auburn. Another quarterback we want to discuss, Anthony Maddox. What can you tell us about him, a three-star quarterback? What's the latest with his recruitment, as it could be coming to an end soon?
Yeah, out of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Oak Grove High School, 6'2", 180 pounds. Watched his film recently, and I see an electric player at the quarterback position, man. There's some fun reps on that film. He's a fluid, athletic, twitchy quarterback with a live arm. You see him ripping the football downfield, phenomenal touch throws for chunk plays, quick release. This is a guy that's got a top three of Alabama, Penn State, and Texas A&M, and he's announcing his college decision this afternoon as we record on Monday morning. He'll be off the board Monday afternoon, so not sure by the time if you're watching this if he's off the board or not. But Texas A&M is trending on the 24/7 Sports, including my crystal ball for the Aggies. And talking to him about his interest in Texas A&M, he talked about how the atmosphere in College Station is electrifying. And he sees an opportunity at Texas A&M to come in and compete as a freshman. He's already built a really good relationship with new offensive coordinator Petrino. He's got a really good relationship with Jimbo Fisher, and he feels like he's their top target at the position. And so called Fisher and Petrino historically two of the greatest offensive minds of all time. And so with that, Texas A&M well positioned for him. Going into his college decision would be a nice pickup for Texas A&M, who already has the nation's number 20 class early on, and looking to add Anthony to that fold.
Yeah, A&M, when it comes to quarterback recruiting, they need to hit. They need to hit it really everywhere on offense as they try to reinvent it. Obviously, Bobby Petrino bringing him in as offensive coordinator is hopefully, if you're an Aggie fan, a big step forward from what they were putting on the field last year. And again, if you're an Aggie fan, you're hoping that this offense is revitalized in 2023. So obviously, since Coach Prime took over at Colorado, we've been talking about the Buffaloes a lot more than we really ever talked about them before. And they landed two commitments over the past couple days, Juwan Johnson and Taylon Chandler. What are they getting in those two prospects, as Deion Sanders already starting to make some noise in the 2024 class?
Yeah, Colorado, they're up at number 12 right now in the 24/7 Sports recruiting rankings early in the cycle. And they're going to have a lot of big name prospects on campus in March and beyond. This is a program that is going to go after the nation's best players. Juwan Johnson fits that bill, a phenomenal high school football player out of Lafayette Christian Academy there in Louisiana, plays quarterback on the prep level. Lance threw for nearly 4,000 yards and 43 touchdowns as a junior, with another 1,284 rushing yards and 17 scores. And when we talked about Colorado's big recruiting weekend on a recent episode of Wiltfong Whiparound, this was one of the names that we highlighted, Juwan Johnson, because he is absolutely one of the most coveted targets on Colorado's board, regardless of position. And he's a guy that I think that they see making plays in all three facets down the road. He's going to start out in the secondary at corner. He's going to be a guy that they utilize in the return game. But he's a guy that we could ultimately see catching passes or maybe carrying the ball a little bit out of the backfield with just how electric he is with the ball in his hands. But he's excited to go into a Colorado program where he sees a coaching staff led by Deion Sanders that will prepare him for football beyond college. He wants to go in there and help rebuild this thing and help try and win games, but said that Deion Sanders has the blueprint for success. He did so at Jackson State, then also talked about it with his personal life. So Colorado, this recruiting class is really starting to come together early on for them. He's commit number 5. And got to love what they're doing defensively early. They have 2 commitments from Valdosta High in the state of Georgia there, Lance. Eric Brantley has had, over his last 2 seasons for Valdosta, 72 tackles for loss. He had 11 sacks here as a junior. They used him in spot duty on offense. He had 7 rushing touchdowns. Omar Weiss, the jewel of the class, his teammate at Valdosta, 28 tackles for loss and 7 sacks. So those guys make a living in the backfield for one of the Peach State's best high school football programs. Juwan Johnson, gives them an athletic playmaker in the secondary and beyond. And so this is a class that I like the early foundation for Deion Sanders and company. We said when Deion Sanders got hired, he'd be pushing for top 20 classes. Early on, he's already pushing for a top 10 class in 2024. So it'll be exciting to see all the visitors that they have on campus beginning in March.
Yeah, and again, they're going to make tons of noise throughout this entire cycle. We saw it already in 2023, landing Cormani McClain in Deion Sanders' short time at Colorado, and now that he has a full cycle to work with, we, like you said, talked about the big junior day they had recently on a previous episode of Whip Around. So many big names headed out to Boulder. You can assume that once the dead period ends and visits restart, so many more big names are going to head out there to check out what Deion Sanders is building at Colorado. Another commitment that happened late last week, that was Mazeo Bennett to South Carolina, the four-star wide receiver. Obviously, South Carolina made a big splash on signing day, landing Nicholas Harbor, and they are already making some noise here in 2024.
Well, South Carolina, they got the number 6 recruiting class in the country early in the cycle. Mazeo Bennett, the latest to join the fold, at one point was committed to Tennessee. So always better to have these kind of talents on your side than having to match up against them in Josh Heupel's offense. But this is a young man that is one of the more explosive players in SEC country, man. As a junior, had 47 catches for nearly 900 yards and 14 touchdowns. And had over 1,700 all-purpose yards and 23 scores. He's explosive with strong ball skills, after the catch ability, a tough, confident football player that addresses a key position of need for South Carolina this cycle. They're going to take 3 or 4 receivers, and they would love to add another dynamic guy to the fold in Jonathan Paylor, who is a devastating offensive player as a runner and pass catcher after the catch with elite speed. And South Carolina's certainly on Paylor's short list as they turn the attention moving forward to him. And then South Carolina, man, I think that they're starting to, they obviously, when you look at this class right now, that's number 6 nationally. You see the beginning workings of what could end up being one of the best offensive line classes in the country, because they have Cam Pringle committed. He's the number 1 offensive tackle in the land per the 24/7 Sports Composite, 6'7", 338 pounds. But I like where South Carolina stands with a couple other of their key targets at the position. You have Josiah Thompson, who's the number 2 ranked offensive tackle in the country for our top 247 player ranking. I think that South Carolina is the team to beat for him. And then another young man who could be one of the next to jump into the fold is Bennett's teammate, Blake Franks, offensive tackle, who I know has been going back and forth between Clemson and South Carolina, but I think South Carolina has the momentum for him. So if, an offensive line class of Pringle, Franks, and Thompson, that's a hell of a run. And with what South Carolina recruited at the offensive line in this 2023 class that ranks number 16 nationally, you can see a lot of emphasis on the trenches, getting stronger and more dominant at the point of attack as Shane Beamer tries to take a team that won 8 games this year and find 3 to 4 more here and really make this team a contender in the SEC.
And with Shane Beamer, look, it wasn't, no one really knew how it was going to go when he took over. Obviously hadn't been a head coach before. But was this, or did you expect this recruiting success at all from him? I mean, really from the start, I know the 2021 class was really transfer heavy, so the recruiting ranking doesn't really tell the whole story of the talent they brought in that cycle. But a top 25 class in 2022, a top 20 class in 2023. Now they have a top 10 class early in 2024. I mean, what do you make of Shane Beamer's just success in recruiting?
Well, I think we knew that he was going to be a really good recruiter, Lance. That was kind of one of his calling cards as an assistant coach throughout his career, was the amount of energy he put into recruiting and the way he was able to build meaningful relationships with top targets at various stops through his career. I think the exciting thing about him is you look at him as a head coach and you take this football team that early in the year, they bring in a bunch of recruits for the Georgia game, including Nicholas Harbor, and they get their teeth kicked in by the Bulldogs, where there's no shame in that. Georgia just won its 2nd straight national championship. But with the way that Coach Beamer and his coaching staff were able to keep this team together and improving throughout the season, week to week, month to month, and by the end of the year, you're beating Tennessee, you're beating Clemson, And those were major wins in November for a football program that continued to get better throughout the course of the year. So, obviously, recruiting, we love talking about recruiting at 24/7 Sports, and it's the lifeblood of football programs. But you got to develop and scheme correctly. And I was impressed with the way that South Carolina's program stayed together and won some big games at the end of the year, which I think has catapulted them on the recruiting trail. Obviously, they didn't have some key players in the bowl game there, which was an awesome game against Notre Dame. But even that, I think a good showing, a good exciting showing in the bowl game. It's just South Carolina football, kind of similar to Auburn, man. There's a lot of excitement around these programs right now that for a while were just so mediocre to under mediocre. You barely thought about them, you barely wrote about them, you barely talked about them. Auburn and South Carolina are much more relevant in my day-to-day work here at 24/7 Sports with the way Coach Freeze and Coach Beamer have them rocking and rolling.
Yeah, no shame in getting blown out by Georgia. But like you said, they definitely ended the season better than how they started, and that's a real testament to the coaching staff and the in-season development of the program there in South Carolina. Leonard Moore, he committed to Notre Dame on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel a few days ago. He committed to the Fighting Irish, another pickup in the secondary for Marcus Freeman. What can you tell us about Moore and what he's going to bring to South Bend?
Yeah, I think he's a smooth cover guy. 7 interceptions over the last 2 seasons. Good change of direction and quickness. I like the physicality that he plays with. I think he reads the field well, can play some man. I like what he does in zone. But again, it's the open field tackling ability. The way he'll come up and hit you really stands out to me. He's also a factor in the return game, but 6'2". 177 pounds. Notre Dame's got the number 2 ranked recruiting class in the country right now, Lance, and they have a couple corners that maybe don't have the national notoriety as some of their peers, but Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs, they are big, long, physical guys on the perimeter. Carson Hobbs, his film really pops with some of the plays that he makes, some of the explosiveness that he shows on film. But back to Leonard Moore, he tweeted this out: 232 coverage snaps, 9 pass breakups, 3 interceptions, only allowed 3 receptions. So he had the same amount of interceptions as receptions that he allowed as a junior. So Notre Dame quietly putting together a really good defensive back class that's going to be big and physical.
Yeah, that's impressive. As many receptions allowed as he had interceptions, that is quite the statistic for one Leonard Moore. So let's end it, Steve, on Williams Nwaneri, the top defensive lineman in the 2024 class, a physical freak, really. He's shown it on the field. He's shown it on the camp circuit. Why he's the top defensive lineman. What can you tell us? And of course, all the top schools are obviously going after him. What can you tell us about the latest in his recruitment?
Well, he recently took visits to Tennessee, Oregon, and Missouri. Oregon's definitely a school that he's extremely high on. Been there a couple times. I think that visit to Tennessee moved the needle. Those are 2 programs that he's built good reports with. Missouri is, and Coach Drinkwitz certainly doing everything they can to keep him in state, and they're a contender that's had him on campus. He's looking to get to Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State this spring, but a couple visits that are locked in. Going to be at Oklahoma the weekend of March 4th. I'm expecting the Sooners to have a major recruiting weekend that weekend as we come out of the dead period. So a lot of Sooners talk that first weekend of March. And then he's going to be at Colorado spring game. This is like we talked about Colorado. They're swinging at the best players in the country, and Williams Nwaneri is locked in his visit to Boulder for the spring game. And we're not saying something that none of y'all know, but he would not be visiting Colorado if Deion Sanders and this coaching staff wasn't there. Nick Williams is leading the charge for Colorado there for Williams Nwaneri. Have a story coming out on 24/7 Sports today about the top off-field recruiters in the country, guys that have made an impact for these college football programs nationally off the field. And Nick Williams was a major guy for Texas A&M for several years, Georgia before that, now getting an opportunity to coach defensive ends at Colorado. Williams Nwaneri is one of his top targets, and he's getting them on campus to visit for the spring game. It's not just Deion Sanders, and he put together a hell of a staff of really good recruiters that are doing an awesome job of getting Colorado off and running there, and so he'll be there. Hey, Lance, how about this, though, man? Zach Ludwig is a linebacker from South Park,
Yep.
Pennsylvania. No 24/7 sports profile, no Twitter profile, hard to even find his huddle unless you go to South Park's high school page and then find it. But Michigan found him, and he visited, and he's 6'3", he's 202 pounds, plays linebacker, also takes some snaps at quarterback. And we find out today, Alan True and myself find out today that he's been committed to Michigan since November 29th, and it is not public. No offer public, no commitment public. I don't know what other offers he may even have, but I talked to him today, and he's in the fold for Michigan. We have a story on our Michigan site right now. He goes, the only thing I posted on is Insta, and my Insta's not that big. I have a feeling he's about to pick up a lot more Michigan followers on his Instagram moving forward. But Michigan's got 7 early commits in the 2024 class, coming off 2 college football playoff experiences. Jacob Oden was one of their most recent commitments, a 4-star safety from Harper Woods that you can watch his commitment on the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. But Ludwig, he talked about the ultimate environment at Michigan that the coaches and players create in Ann Arbor. But he's in the fold. We're still learning about him. But I just thought it was pretty cool, man. In an era like we have today where almost every offer is posted and every visit is posted and certainly commitments posted on social media, this is a young man that flew under the radar, and someone had to tip us off that he was in the fold for Michigan. Reached out to him, and we have a story up on him being in the fold for the Maize and Blue. And
Well,
I bet
Steve, they
you know
say,
what we know about Michigan, he might end up being one of the best players in their
yeah,
class. You know,
yeah. Look, Michigan Development U, and look, Steve, they say that the best people learn something new every day. And today, you learned that Ludwig committed to Michigan back in November. We all learned, frankly, that Ludwig committed to Michigan back in
this
November.
just seems like this is just seems like a Jim Harbaugh recruit, right?
Yeah,
Like just
yeah.
a ball player that doesn't give a damn about social media or tweet, his profile or whatever. And if you would have said, Steve, predict a school that has a guy committed that no one knows about, that'll go
Michigan
public
would have
months
been your
later, I
choice.
would have put Michigan on that short list. So um,
Yeah.
I just thought it was cool.
And credit to him. I mean, in the world that we live in today, where everything's on social media, especially when it comes to recruiting, right? To have your commitment go under the radar, to solely post it on Insta and not have it blow up, especially with a fan base like Michigan. I give him credit. I'm one of those hardworking, or I consider myself one of those hardworking kind of kids where if I were good enough to be a high school commit when I was in high school, I would have just kind of done the same thing, committed and put it behind me. So credit where credit is due, because it is very hard to keep something quiet when you put it on social media. Yet he was able to do so, and credit to
Michigan trusts
Michigan
in
as
their
well.
evaluation, and they don't need to be validated by other programs recruiting a kid, which we knew that about Michigan anyway, but still always cool to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, recruiting never stops, even if we're in a dead period. So much news still going, and we're going to bring you the Wiltfong Whiparound every single week moving forward. We might be changing up a couple days here and there, and we will let you know when we do. But always, of course, stay locked into the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel for the latest content. Of course, stay locked into 247sports.com for all the latest college football, college basketball, and recruiting news you could ever ask for. So for Steve Wiltfong, our Director of Recruiting, I am Lance Glynn. This has been the Wiltfong Whiparound.